Now, last Tuesday, Charlotte Cahill opened up to us about the heartbreak of being unable to get a school place for her 5-year-old daughter, Kyra, who has additional needs.
There was such a huge reaction to Charlotte's story, and thank you so much for being in contact about it. We're going to remind ourselves of what Charlotte had to say.
For the last 2 years, I have been applying to multiple schools. Last year, I applied to 35 schools. Every single one of them rejected. This year,
She's got special educational needs.
She does.
Yep.
She has a diagnosis of autism, epilepsy and ARFID. She also has a pathological demand avoidance profile. A lot of the schools came back to say that she met the criteria, but they were just oversubscribed. This year, I've applied to 25 schools and I've heard back from 22 and all refusals. So just there's such a high demand. Last year, I was second on a school list. This year, I'm 16th on the exact same school. I want to see these 136 children with a school place. I want them to walk through the doors of a classroom. I want to buy my child's uniform and watch her go to school with my nephews. My nephew is a year younger than Kyra and he starts primary school come September. And if I have to watch her sit back again for another year.
Yeah. Well, following Charlotte's interview, there was a 24-hour protest outside the Department of Education last Friday.
We want to carry on this conversation, and joining us now is campaigner and SNA Linda O'Sullivan. Linda, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We know that you're close with Charlotte, that you've been campaigning together for quite a long time. So you've been in SNA for 7 years.
Yes. Yep.
Can you give us an insight for some people who might know what is it like? What is the situation with getting SEN places?
They're non-existent in most of the communities across the country. So I'm in Dublin Northwest and we have a deplorable amount of children that are still on waiting lists to get appropriate school places. It's at rock bottom, but it's not a new phenomenon. This is historical. It happens every year. We have TDs then who pretend that it's the first ever time this has happened, but roll around August, September, we have the exact same situation time and time again, and they're not learning from it. In schools then, schools are trying their very best to open these classes. Principals are trying to manage, trying to open autism classes. They're getting pushback from the department. Then the schools that are opening these places, it's only 6 children per class. And we need to see an autism class in every school in the country. And unfortunately, that still hasn't happened in 2025.
I mean, you were part, because you, as you said, this is the same thing happening over and over again. So you were there for the protests last year as well.
Yeah.
Has there been any response from the Department of Education?
The only response to date was on Thursday evening before Charlotte's protest, where government TDs gaslighted parents by deciding to say how wonderful they were that they were opening these classes. Look at these numbers. But to be honest, a lot of it were classes that were already promised the year before that still never got the go-ahead to go ahead, basically. Right. And then we have government TDs gaslighting parents, saying, oh, we're opening these classes. But actually, on the ground, if you were to ask those schools, you were to ask those communities, those places still haven't become available.
Because that was in the programme for government, that was in the budget, that every school was going to have one of the 6 places for SEN schools. 0896 111 111 to get in contact with us this morning in relation to this issue. Because so many people were commenting on the fact she was second on the list and the next thing you're 16th on the list. It feels like parents have to go public. Because once you go public, the department are going to sort you out. Do you know what I mean? Because they don't want that criticism. The system doesn't seem to make any sense. What is it like on the ground as an SNA for these children and dealing with children with special needs?
Our hearts are broken because more often than not, if you're an SNA in 5th or 6th class and you're preparing then for the child to move on to secondary school, or if you're an SNA and you've had a child in the autism class and they're progressing on, more often than not, that parent is going to come to you in June and say, we have no spot. We've no spot in secondary school. We have no spot to move the child on. So they're in limbo. They're waiting to see what's going to happen. But on the ground, SNAs have never worked with the amount of care needs that we're dealing with now. the amount of children that are, and why we say appropriate school places is because a lot of these parents are left with no alternative. They require an autism class, these children, but unfortunately they're left with no alternative but to take a mainstream place. And then that's not appropriate to their needs. We want to meet the care needs of the children that we work with. But then what happens is we're dealing with the largest amount of needs ever in mainstream education. And post-COVID in particular, we've seen a lot of regression with children, a lot of delays in speech, etc., a lot of misdiagnosis as well. And we're trying our level best in mainstream, but we know it's not an appropriate setting for those children. And we SNAs are working with more children than ever before.
And you do an amazing job. Is it a role that you would encourage more people to get into? Because obviously there's a shortage of SNAs out there, but when they're seeing this and seeing the more and more numbers and more pressure they're being put under.
Yeah, I mean, it's a job that it's such a caring role. You become so close to the children that you work with that every day is different, but you will never, the impact that you have on those children, but then on their families, it's a ripple effect in the community that you'd never get a job like it. You know what I mean? It's so rewarding when I've been so lucky and privileged to be able to hear a child say their first words. I've seen children go on and do exceptional in secondary school when they were told by, you know, educational psychologists that they would never amount to whatever. Like, I have such a bond with so many of the children that I have worked with through the years, and that's the role of the SNA. Our role is we are their mums and their dads when they're in school. And, you know,
Linda,
there's no other job like it.
That's amazing and it's rewarding. And an awful lot of times, these vocational roles like nurses and SNAs and teachers, you know, they're largely female professions an awful lot of the time.
Yep.
And sometimes there aren't the supports that there should be there, because it's not like you're treated like a teacher. You're paid differently. There are an awful lot of SNAs have to go out on sick leave, injury leave.
Yes.
And there aren't the supports there for them.
No. Still, unfortunately, the department kind of disregard and disrespect SNAs, and they're not in line as to the difference that we make with the children that we work with, unfortunately. And if you speak to any parent across the country, they will tell you that they value the SNAs. And, you know, we really need the department to be able to value our role, because, let's be honest, the children with additional needs in this country could not attend school without the help and support of SNAs who help them access the curriculum.
What do we need the government to do, the Department of Education to do?
School places. We need adequate, appropriate school places for every child. I mean, when we look at, you know, cherish every child equally, we're not cherishing every child equally, because it's not about equality, it's equity as well. So it's, yes, you can provide a school place. That's not a tick off, you know, just tick it off the list there. It's an appropriate school place where the care needs of that child are going to be met. And that's crucially important, or else you're going to see regression or school refusal, and then, you know, what happens to the child then?
How do you feel when you hear, I've heard from an awful lot of parents and teachers about wastage from government spending in relation to maybe free school meals for every child pouches. And the mobile phone pouches.
Like mobile phone pouches, for the vast majority of secondary schools, they already have pouches in place already. In primary school, yes, it's an absolute issue, mobile phones and stuff, but I would absolutely categorically say, if you were to say to any education leader in this country, SNAs, teachers, you know, what do you want the money to be spent on? We want adequate, appropriate school places for children, not mobile phone pouches, you know, and that's what we want. The demand is very simple. We want every child in the country who has additional needs to be able to attend school in an appropriate setting for them.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning, campaigner and SNA Linda O'Sullivan. We really do appreciate it. We'd love to hear from you. Again, it's such a huge issue. 0896 111 111.